All right, today we're jumping into a really fascinating argument. It's one that tries to use modern science to explain a classical religious law about legal testimony. Now, our goal here isn't to debate the ruling itself, but to really pull apart the structure of the argument. So let's dive in. So, right off the bat, the source is asking a pretty huge question. Can you take today's science, we're talking neuroscience, memory research, and use it to explain a legal standard that was set down centuries ago? It's a bold idea for sure. Let's see how they try to build that case. Okay, so what's this all about? It boils down to one specific ruling from Islamic law. It's about financial transactions, and it says that the testimony required is either one man or, if a man isn't available, two women. This specific rule is the absolute foundation for the entire scientific argument the source is about to make. So, the argument kicks off with its first big idea, and it's all about memory and its connection to our emotions. The source's whole point here is that there are real, fundamental differences in how memory works for men and women, and that science can show us what they are. And this is where the source really starts to draw a line in the sand. It argues that female memory is, way more tied up with emotion, and that it can even decline after menopause. Male memory, on the other hand, is presented as being more stable, less swayed by feelings. Now, to back this up, the author doesn't just make these claims out of thin air. They point to some specific sources. For the idea about memory shifts, they reference the North American Menopause Society. And to support the claim that women remember things with more emotional color, they cite a study from the Journal of Neuroscience. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Well, according to the source, the second female witness is there for a very practical reason. She's basically quality control. The idea is that she's there to help confirm the facts and filter out any potential emotional bias or memory glitches, just to make sure the testimony is rock solid. All right, let's get into the next piece of the puzzle. We're shifting gears from how memory works to the actual physical structure of the brain itself. The claim here is pretty straightforward. Male and female brains are wired up differently, making them better at different kinds of jobs. And to really drive this point home, the source brings out a heavy hitter, a huge study from the University of Pennsylvania that looked at the brains of almost 1,000 people. Citing a study this big is a clear move to give the argument that follows a whole lot of scientific credibility. So the way the source interprets this study is that these different brain wirings lead to different skills. It says the female brain, with more connections going side to side between hemispheres, is better at things like multitasking and social interactions. The male brain, with stronger connections running from front to back inside each hemisphere, is supposedly better at zeroing in on a single task. And this right here, this table, really gets to the heart of it. The source uses this data to show what it sees as two different types of neural highways. You've got the male brain's path, described as front to back for focused work, and the female brain's path, left to right, which the source connects directly to multitasking. And, to really put a pin in this, the source even drops in a quote from one of the actual researchers, Dr. Reuben Gur. And notice the key word here. The focus isn't just that the brains are different, but that they're complementary. That's a crucial part of the argument. Okay, so this is where it all comes together. The author takes these two big scientific ideas, the one about memory and the one about brain structure, and tries to build a bridge connecting them directly to the religious text that started this whole thing. And this is the verse that's held up as the foundation for the whole thing. The source zooms in on that specific phrase, "the other can remind her." They argue that this little phrase is the key to understanding the real purpose of the ruling, a purpose they're about to explain using all that science we just talked about. So here's the logical roadmap they lay out. Step 1, giving testimony in a legal case is serious business. It requires intense focus. Step 2, based on that brain science they showed us, male brains are supposedly better at that kind of single-focus task. And therefore, step 3, that reminder function in the verse isn't about one person being less capable, it's just a practical, built-in support system. And all of this builds up to the author's grand finale, which is an attempt to completely reframe how we should think about this ruling. It's a move away from any talk about competence and towards a conversation about, consideration. So the big argument here is that this rule isn't what you might think. It's not about diminishing a woman's testimony. Instead, the source argues it's an accommodation, a way to lighten what it calls the heavy mental and psychological burden of having to testify all by yourself. And this reinterpretation is propped up by a few key points.
The rule is framed as a way to take the pressure off, as a kind of protection, and even as a sort of benefit, one that the author claims men would actually want for themselves if they had the option. And really, this one quote from the source says it all. The argument is that when you look at the ruling through this specific scientific and religious lens, it's not about inequality at all. It's transformed into an act of honoring and caring for women. So there you have it. That's the argument, laid out from neuroscience all the way to scripture. And it leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. How does this trend of mixing modern scientific data with ancient texts actually shape these conversations today? It's a really powerful way to frame an argument, and understanding how it's constructed is everything.